clearly last year took its toll on all of us. I think it was an emotional roller coaster for us all, but we've got the hang of this lockdown thing now. And let's hope by the end of Q1, we can start to go back to some sort of normality. And so actually we can see, as we get through the colder months, we can all be looking forward to really setting off, so we can see this Q1 as being the opportunity to get all the foundations in place so that we can absolutely fly through the year once we're allowed to. I want to remind you of the book, The 5 a.m. Club, when we come to thinking about goals. And I'm going to take you through 3 different exercises today. 2 will be really short and 1 will be slightly longer. One is something that many of the team will have done before, but it's a really good exercise for helping you clarify what your goals are. And it's why, for those of you that know what I'm talking about, why I'm committed to living to 112 at the moment, but why Dan Sullivan is committed to living to 154. I'll explain more for those of you that don't know what we're talking about in due course. But one of the things I really liked about the 5 a.m. Club, and I still really encourage you all to read this book because it's got so many brilliant principles within it, albeit woven around a bit of a crap story. One of the things it talks about is at the 4 heart sets. So the 4 elements of our life that really make us happy. And I just want to spend a little bit of time on each of them, because when you're setting your goals, you really want to be thinking about these different aspects of your life, because how can you set goals that mean that you're covering each of these different areas? And the first one he talked about is mindset, so psychology. So one of the things that you might, as an example, want to do is read something that would make you more optimistic. The Rational Optimist is an amazing book for that sort of stuff, because it helps you understand that actually the world is much better than you think. And even though 2020 was a shit show with regards to what we were expecting it to be, actually the world is still a much better place than we think it is. And I'm just reading a book at the moment, which is the latest finance book by Tony Robbins. Really, it's Tony Robbins doing the intro and the outro. I'm guessing I haven't got to the end of it yet. And then it's an American financial planner that he is a shareholder in the business of, doing almost all of it. But this book was written during the COVID-19 crisis. And yet these charts all still were used in terms of reminding us that the world is still getting better and better, despite what we might think. So the percentage of income spent on the necessities, important parts of life, has dropped massively over years. We've got the well-being index has been consistently rising year on year. Life expectancy is consistently been rising. Extreme poverty around the world is consistently falling. Years schooling is consistently rising. So yes, it might feel like last year was a bit of a crap year and that the world is getting a worse place, but actually when we look at it in a greater context, it's getting far better year on year. So it's about the mind, it's about having a positive mindset. And the Rational Optimist is a great way of thinking about that. I love the Muhammad Ali statement when he was asked by a journalist how many push-ups he could do. And his answer was 9. And the journalist said, 9? And he said, yeah, when I get to the point where I don't think I can do any more press-ups, I know I can do 9 more. And that's just having that positive mindset and that growth mindset. And if you haven't watched the recording of the Learning Lunch about Carol Dweck's mindset, about fixed mindset versus growth mindset, I really encourage you to do that at some point, because it's just having a growth mindset, which I know pretty much everyone in a Efficient Portfolio has, is just such an important thing. And mindset is a funny thing because, for many years, experts said that the human body was just simply not capable of doing a 4-minute mile. It wasn't just dangerous, but it was actually impossible. Legends told that people even tied a bull behind them to increase their motivation to do what was considered the impossible, but without success. And then in the 1940s, the mile record was pushed down to 4 minutes and 1 second, where it stood for another 9 years as runners struggled with the idea that maybe the experts were right and perhaps the human body just could not go faster than that. But of course, they were wrong. On the 6th of May, 1954, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute barrier, running in 3 minutes, 59 seconds, 59.4 seconds to be exact. And as part of his training, he relentlessly visualized the achievement in order to create a sense of certainty in his mind and his body. And he created a mindset that was convinced it could be done. And sure enough, that's exactly what he achieved. But to highlight how mindset makes such a difference, barely a year after Bannister's accomplishment, someone else ran a mile in under 4 minutes, then another, and now it's almost routine for good runners to do that. I'm not saying that it's easy. I know for a fact that I couldn't get anywhere close to it and never will do, but it's extremely achievable for many runners of all descriptions. And obviously now in the last couple of years, we've had Eliud Kipchoge run the the sub 2 hour marathon, which is actually, I think that works out to be something like 4-minute, 30-second miles for the entirety of a marathon. So it really is, it does show you how mindset makes such a difference, but how Bannister also achieved it by programming his subconscious to accept that it was going to happen. So that's the power of goals. So you need to be thinking about what goals can you set around your psychology that will help boost that for you. The next one that they talk about in the 5 a.m. club is the heart set. So heart set is your emotional well-being. To cultivate a healthy emotional life, we need to express ourselves and have healthy emotional attachments. And this is absolutely vital to our success. And so, what books could you perhaps read that would help boost that? Some obvious ones that spring to mind are things like Awaken the Giant Within, which I did the learning lunch about before. Everything is Figure-Outable is a good book for that. How to Fail. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which is another book by Robin Sharma, the author of the 5 a.m. Club. What can you do to improve your emotional well-being as part of your goal setting? Because really we want to be setting goals that are going to make us happier, so we need to have this in the forefront of our mind when we're setting goals. Another thing that we can be thinking about in terms of keeping our emotions or keeping ourselves happy and thinking about our heart set and our emotions is not multitasking. We tend to get more stressed out when multitasking, as well as working less efficiently. So I talked a couple of times last year about this concept of there's no such thing as multitasking. It's what's called switch tasking. It's like doing one task, then switching to another task, then switching back. And for those of you who remember, I got you to do that exercise of writing a sentence that was something along the lines of multitasking is the biggest, greatest lie, and then writing 1 to 27 underneath it. And then I got you to do it alternate, and you were way, way, way slower on the latter. And you also made a load of mistakes. That's because you're switch tasking, and we work less effectively when we're switch tasking. So, focusing on the job in hand, putting phones aside, just getting the job done, and then having a mental break and doing something else, you will be far more effective and you'll be far happier. And you also might want to think about what I refer to in entrepreneurial happiness as no extra time. So net time, no extra time, is how can you achieve some of these things without it taking any more time? So for example, I listen to about a book a week, but I'm an incredibly slow reader. But I listen to that book a week while I'm on the turbo trainer, while I'm out running, while I'm on the bike, while I'm in the car. So it doesn't cost me any time, but I get to learn from a book a week. So how can you find things that you can do in your life which you can do at the same time as other things, so it's costing you no extra time? And also, when you're planning your time, if you remember when we have this peak, this trough, and this rebound for most people, so for about 80% of us, those that aren't the night owls, we peak in the morning, where our peak performance is in the morning, we have a trough after lunch, and then we have a rebound in the sort of late afternoon. So doing our peak focus activities in the morning, client meetings, for example. Creativity work is better in the trough. So maybe sitting down and kind of writing a plan or doing something like that in the afternoon might be better. And in the late afternoon, the rebound is then back to full focus. And remember that, as I said, 80% of people fall into the larks and the third birds, but there are 20% of you, Tom, for example, that is an owl potentially. And so therefore, if you are an owl, that flips around and your peak is actually at the end of the day, but your rebound, which is slightly lower than your peak, is in the morning. So, but still having that trough after lunch. So just think when you're setting your goals, and I'm going to be talking a bit about habits, thinking about habits and how can you improve the way you work and how happy you are around your work by thinking about these, when you do the best work at the best times.
Is it always post-meal time, Charlie, or is it more sort of cycle through the day?
It's cycle through the day. It's actually not post-meal time. I think it's exaggerated post-meal time because of the type of diet that a lot of people eat. If you eat bread for lunch, you're much more likely to have a greater trough, just because you're creating a massive spike in blood sugar and then a dive. But no, it actually happens naturally regardless of when you're eating.
Okay.
And so think about when you do the different tasks, which if you do your creative stuff at the time in the trough and your more analytical stuff, your left brain thinking in your peak time, then actually you're likely to work better. And funnily enough, my daughters were saying today, Fiona and Bronwyn were just saying at lunchtime, Daddy, do you know that you're supposed to look at something every 10 minutes? You're supposed to look out the window at something for 10 seconds that's 10 feet away. And I was like, well, I've got it as 20, and this, I'd already put this in there. I've got it as 20, every 20 minutes, look at something that's 20 feet away for 20 seconds. Either way, I don't care which you do. The principle is great, and it will, so it's setting up habits and things like that can boost your emotional well-being. And you want to be thinking about those sorts of things when you're setting your goals. There's then your health set, the physicality of how healthy you are, and one of the best ways to get ahead in life is to live longer, something I'm going to be talking about later on. So if you want to be in charge of your empire, you need to live long enough to do this, and committing to exercise. And this isn't just about being fit and healthy, which is being fit, it's also about being healthy. So you've got to think about how you can be, you can eat the right things as well as being fit and getting out and doing your 10,000 steps or whatever it is. So again, some things that you might want to be setting as a goals might be to read a book like Finding Ultra is an amazingly inspirational book. Michael Langman, Tom's clients, who a few of you know, was massively inspired by Finding Ultra in the same way that I was. The Art of Resilience is a book I was recommending to Tim earlier on when he popped over to pick up some workout stuff. It's an absolutely brilliant book by the first guy to swim round Great Britain, but it also talks a lot about stoicism and training, and really brilliant story, but a brilliant book. And so you might want to think about building your own training plan, whether that's to achieve something like doing a triathlon or whether it's just to do your 5K. Building out a plan will give you something to focus on and a plan to work to, even if it's right. My plan is I'm going to run 3 times a week and I'm going to do whatever, whatever it is that's appropriate to you. Having some sort of plan put in place has got to be a good thing. I know I got about standing desks a lot. I know that you guys can't access your standing desks very easily at the moment, but I would encourage you, when you can, to work standing up. I heard in Peak Performance, which is a brilliant book on both sport performance and mental performance, they use the term sitting is the new smoking. I'm not sure it's quite that bad, but it isn't particularly good for your health. And if when I interviewed Shane Benzie, who is one of the top running coaches around the world, he said that the best thing you can do for your fitness and your health and fitness is to have a standing desk. Because he said essentially that means you're you're working out and your strength building over the course of the day. So I'd really encourage you to, even if you're only doing it when you go to the office, make sure you're standing, not sitting. When you're exercising, the book When talked about the power of being in sync with other people. I know this is not quite so easy at the moment, but even if you can just go for a run with somebody else, or you can do some yoga online with other people, being in synchronization with other people actually really improves your mental well-being as well. And then the final one of those 4 principles from the 5 a.m. Club is Soul Set. It's all about our spirituality. Whatever you believe, make time in the morning to connect with your spirituality and yourself. So I just finished reading a book called The Untethered Soul, which was really interesting about, how do you describe what it's about? I suppose it's just a really interesting spiritual book. It only turns religious right in the last chapter, but the principles before that are, I thought it was a really good book, actually. But if you haven't read it already, get some Headspace by Andy Puddicombe. Meditating, I'm going to come on to some new habits I've set, but meditating every day, for example, would be a great way of doing this. 5-minute journal app, journaling in the morning. So that's something that you can do really quick and easy, but it's just helping you start the day in the right mindset, focusing on what you're grateful for. And you might also want to think about napping. Again, something I talked about with from the book When. For the Triathlon podcast, I recently interviewed a sleep specialist. And she was saying you shouldn't need to nap every day. If you feel the need to nap every day, you're not getting enough sleep at night time. But a nap is a really useful tool to use if you are sleep deprived, you're going to be sleep deprived. And it's a basic, and what I couldn't quite understand was how we talk about this 90-minute sleep cycle, but a 10-minute or even a 1-minute nap can actually help you. And it's because there's because of adenosine buildup in our body. And adenosine is basically the hormone telling you that you need to go to sleep, and that hormone builds up. And by having a nap, what you do is you just kind of like release the shutters and you let go of the adenosine. And even though you haven't had any quality sleep, you will feel so much more invigorated. So a nap between really up to 10 minutes, and definitely no more than 20 minutes, because you'll start to get sleep lethargy if you go for longer than that. But I find on the days where I am feeling tired, and again, in that trough is the best time to do this. So after lunch, literally, sometimes if I have a nap, it will be for like 1 minute or 2 minutes, but it's amazing how much better you feel for it for the rest of the day. So remember that it takes 66 days to create a habit. The first 22 days are, I can't remember what the 5 a.m. Club uses can anyone remind me what the 3 stages are? The first one is, I don't think this says, first one is painful, second 22 days is messy, and the third 22 days is bliss. I can't remember exactly how he puts it, but if you're going to use habits to improve the approach that your effectiveness in life, then just remember that 22 days is going to be misery, 22 days is going to be messy, and then after another 22 days you will really see the benefit of it. And he talks about using that first hour of the day to get 20 minutes of exercise, 20 minutes of reflection, and 20 minutes of growth. So that might all be done at the same time. You might run for an hour whilst you to get your exercise, whilst you spend some time thinking about your gratitude and some time listening to a book. You could do it that way, but really that first hour of the day. But the whole point of these habits is that they create a compound effect. So if you meditate every day for a week, by the end of that week, you might feel marginally better. If you do it every day for a year, you'll probably feel 10 times better. Same with exercise. If you exercise every day this week, you'll see a little bit of gain. But if you exercise every day this year, you'll see a massive gain because of the compound effect. So it is about finding ways to hit goals as well as just setting goals. Setting goals is great. What you're doing is you're programming the subconscious mind to tell it what's important to you. But it's really important that you work out how you can actually hit them as well. And reaching goals isn't about doing kind of like hitting home runs, so doing these massive steps up. It's this compound effect over time, and that's why habits are such a powerful way of doing that. And you can do it by removing bad habits, or you can do it by introducing good habits. So one of the things I've done this year is I've got 6 habits that I'm focusing on every day. I've just gone really simple, stuck them on a post-it note. So my 3 good habits to do every day are to meditate, to read for at least 10 minutes. And this Inner Size book that I mentioned earlier talks you through an exercise. I will do a learning lunch, I suspect, on Inner Size in due course, but it talks you through an exercise that's similar to what Luke Tibersky gave us, which was, it's basically 6 deep breaths in through your nose, saying, or mentally saying, calm in, and 6 deep breaths out through your mouth. Obviously, not all, you've got to do the 6 in and then not 6 in, then 6 out, but you know what I mean. And then 6 deep breaths out, saying stress out, or pain out, or fear out, or anger out, or whatever it is that's most relevant to you at that moment. I'm going to do that at the end of every day before I leave my work head and go into my, as a way of kind of breaking up my work life to my family life, try and put me in a better mindset for that. So that's my 3 good habits. My 3 bad habits that I'm going to kind of reference every day. I'm spending too much time online shopping. The number of Sport Pursuit parcels and Wiggle parcels that come through and Amazon parcels that come through the door is alarming. So I'm going to focus on not doing that. Instagram is dragging me down at the moment, so I need to spend less time on that, and I need to spend less time looking at my phone when I should be engaging with the people around me. Not that there's that many of them, but so those are some simple habits that I'm going to personally do. 3 focus, 3 bad, 3 good. So what I thought we'd do, as I've been speaking for about 40 minutes now, is let's just spend 5 minutes. I'll put some thinking music on, and I want you to try and come, and I'm not going to ask you to share this with anybody else. This is for you and you only, but I'd like you to come up with 3 bad habits and 3 good habits that you would like to be aware of daily. And those habits could be to achieve anything. They could be to get fitter. They could be to get healthier. They could be to get happier. They could be to get wealthier, whatever it is. So I'll give you 5 minutes and some thinking music, and you can focus on that. So what I want you to do is to make sure that when you come to writing out your goals, and we'll come back to how we do that in due course, make sure that these habits are in there. And if you're going to really lock them in as a habit, they've got to be really featuring, certainly for all of Q1. And at that point you can, I mean, so Inner Size reckons that depending on the habit, it takes between 21 days and 365 days to really embed it. Depends, of course, exactly what it is, but I would think if you're doing something every day or over the course of the week, depending on what it is, every week, if you're doing it every day, a quarter is easily enough to get that habit locked in. If it's only a once a week activity, then you might need to be doing it for longer. But one of the things that he talks about with habits is you've got to think about the trigger. So the key to trigger, and I still haven't read Atomic Habits, but I know somebody here has, I can't remember who, or was it somebody, it might have been, no, I think it might have been somebody in Breakthrough Business Breakfast. But you guys had seen, a few of you have seen James Clear from the MDRT talks. But the key is that trigger. What happens right at the start of a time when you're about to start it? So for example, if I'm about to go for a run, the first thing I do is, when I get, first thing in the morning, the first thing I do is I get my running kit out of the drawer. So that's kind of like once I've got the running kit out, I'm not going to not go for a run. On occasions, I've got the running kit out, then I've realized the weather's really bad and it's snowing, and I'm like, oh bollocks, I've got the running kit out ready. I'm still going because the trigger's been done. And the same applies with a bad habit. So for example, if it's smoking, I know most of you don't smoke, most of you are far too sensible for things like that. But if it is smoking, then it might be something you do just before that, or just, you've got to find these triggers. And if you can replace those bad triggers with good triggers, or install good triggers for good habits, then you're much more likely to then carry on through with those habits each time. So you could try and identify what that trigger is. But these triggers and these habits should be featuring you on your goals when you come to write them. And as a reminder, again, from Robin Sharma, take excellent care of the front end of your day. The rest will take care of itself. That first hour of the day, if you can, as I say, get some exercise, get some learning, and get some, what's the right word? Whether it's meditation or gratitude or something like that in there, then you will be off to a far better start for the day. And as I say, I really like that 5-minute journal app. I think that's a great way of documenting it, but handwriting it would also be really good. So then coming on to goals, I was speaking to a lady that, again, I've interviewed on the Triathlon podcast, who coaches a lot of younger people. And she introduced me to a concept of the pig and the chicken when it comes to setting goals. I was like, the pig and the chicken, what are you talking about? And she said, well, it's all to do with a cooked breakfast. So the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. So when it comes to your goals, are you committed, or are you just involved? Are you kind of think, well, that'd be a nice to have, or is it something you're absolutely determined to achieve, and are you committed like the pig? And I've heard people sometimes say that they're not goal orientated, but I think that's generally because they haven't identified goals that make them, if the goal is important to you, you will be committed to delivering it. And so it's about finding goals that are important to you. And, goal setting does work incredibly well. For those of you that haven't, I probably told most of you this already, but, I was on my strategic coach workshop in 2012, and it was September 2012. And one of my fellow entrepreneurs announced that he'd just got his first book published. And I looked at it and went, bloody hell, that's amazing. I could instantly see how that was going to transform his business. And I wrote every time I was at Strategic Coach, every quarter, I'd be rewriting out my goals. And I wrote down about the fact that I wanted to, for my 3-year goals, I wrote to have a book published. I had no idea what I was going to write about. I'd not written, I wasn't writing any content at that time. So I hadn't, no expertise on that. Didn't know how to get a book published, none of it. But I wrote down on my 3-year goals, and then I just broke it backwards and said, well, okay, what do I need to do this year? Well, this year, really all I need to do, I've started writing it and have a working title and mapped it all out. And okay, so what have I got to do this quarter? Well, this quarter, I've just got to think of the subject. I've got to work that out. And of course, what's happening is you're programming that subconscious to be thinking about the subject. And then sure enough, it pops into your head and you're like, oh, hang on, I'm doing a load of work on retirement at the moment for a load of clients. That's the subject. And it does work incredibly well. And the same applies to when I did the Ironman. I read Finding Ultra, and I was getting to the end of 2014. And I was thinking, right, okay, what am I going to set for my next fitness goal? Because I was just cycling at the time, and I'd done a 142-mile bike ride that year. And I was like, well, do I just cycle longer? And I was reading Finding Ultra, and I thought, you know what? The idea of this triathlon thing seems pretty cool. So on my 3-year goals, I wrote down to complete an Ironman. Now, I'd never run more than probably about 6 miles in one go at that point. I hadn't been running at all really since school, and didn't enjoy it then. I hadn't swum since school, but I thought, well, okay, what have I got to do this year? So I set myself the target of doing 2 sprint triathlons, a Olympic distance triathlon. And if I managed to get through that, I'd do a half Ironman. And then basically just built up. And sure enough, 3 years later, I'd gone from never running a marathon before to doing one after a 112-mile bike ride and a 2.4-mile swim. So it's absolutely, these things are far more achievable than you realize as long as you realize that what we can achieve over the longer time frame is much greater than you think. What we think we can achieve over a short time frame is we think we overestimate what we can achieve in the short time frame, whereas we massively underestimate what we can achieve in the long time frame because of that compound effect that I was just talking about. So when you come to set goals, it's really important that you think of goals in a what they call a SMART setting. So I know that, I think, was it Luke Taberski that said he didn't like SMART goals? I disagree with that. I think they do need to be specific. They do need to be measurable. They do need to be attainable. They do need to be relevant, and they do need to be timely. So you've got to, when you're writing your goals, think about, right, okay, what is specific? It's no good saying, I want to feel happy, because how do you measure how happy you feel? Now, you might find a way of specifically, you know, I want to feel happy. You know, I've got this survey. When I complete this survey and I get more than 70%, then I know I'm happy. That would be specific. But you've got to make sure that these are SMART goals and they are therefore specific and they are attainable. But I'll come back to the attainable piece in a minute. And then you've really got to think about how you do that, how you revisit these goals, because if you're going to achieve them, you've got to, it's no good just writing them down and forgetting about them. And the analogy I use in the Breakthrough Business Breakfast is when I was doing that Ironman, my first Ironman, I needed to run my first ever marathon, which obviously I did with Tim, Katie, Dan, and myself. I did the Brighton Marathon in April 2019, a few months before the Ironman. And I was training for it. And one of the guys I swam with said, well, I'd look into run, walk, run. I was like, well, run, walk, run, that, I don't know what that is. And he said, well, basically, it's just a specific strategy on, rather than trying to run the whole marathon, particularly at the end of an Ironman, you might want to run for a period, walk for a specific period, and then run for a particular period. And it works so well. So I did it for Brighton Marathon, did it for Ironman. I've done it for every long run since. And I started with a 9-minute run, 1-minute walk. I now tend to go more like 9-minute run, 30-second walk, unless I'm doing longer runs than a marathon. But you can play around with that and it's really powerful actually. And if you're going to get into running, I would really suggest that you look into this. And the best way you can do that actually is, there's 2 triathlon podcasts that are about this. One by Jeff Galloway, who's the founder of it. The second is Mitch Phillips, who used this to do a sub 3-hour marathon. So it's not something that you only use if you're at the start of your marathon journey. Jeff Galloway did his fastest ever marathon using run, walk, run, and that was a 2-hour, 16-minute, I think. But what's really good about the run, walk, run strategy is that it breaks it up. So even if you're going to, you're going to run a 10-mile run, instead of thinking, oh, I've got 9 more miles to go and I'm already tired, you're only thinking, oh, I've only got 2 more minutes before I can walk again. So it helps you mentally chunk the process down. It also means that you're much less likely to get injured, because it allows your muscles to recover, because the muscles you use while walking are different to the ones that you use while running. It allows you to reflect. So at the start of my marathon in the Ironman, I was going too quickly, and it allowed me to, each time I was looking at my watch going, no, I've got to slow down or I'm going to blow up here. So it allows you to reflect on what's happened already, and mentally it just allows you to re-energize and go again for the next session. And goal setting is exactly the same. So with goal setting, you can set year goals, but you'll run out of steam. You won't hit the goal. You will run out of steam if you just set a year goal and then forget about it and expect to achieve it. Really, the longest we can go mentally energized on a particular goal is 90 days. And after 90 days, your enthusiasm will be dropping, your energy will be dropping for those goals. And that's why, as an absolute minimum, you've got to be looking at these, you've got to be looking at your year's goals every 90 days. So that's why we have quarterly goals, because that makes sure that we're re-looking at our year goals every quarter and re-establishing new quarterly goals. But it's absolutely vital that you also look at your quarterly goals every month and your monthly goals every week, because that way you know that every day or every week you're working towards those year goals. And one thing I do absolutely agree with Luke Taberski on is that we need to think big when we're setting our goals. Big enough to scare you, but not kill you is the principle. Because if you don't set big enough, I would far rather set a goal of 10 million pounds and we hit 8 million than setting a goal for 6 million and hitting 6 million. Because by setting the big goal, it drives you further. And even if you don't hit the goal, hitting the goal often isn't the most important thing. It's using the goal to drive you in the right direction that's the most important thing. So I know it's difficult, but I really want you to try and set goals that help, that do scare you, but that won't kill you. And let's be honest, with the Ironman, it actually could have killed me, but hey ho. And this bloody ultra might as well. But anyway, we'll see. But it is, you've got to set these goals, and even if you don't hit them, you will have achieved so much more than if you set goals that you know that you can hit. So I really want you to think big when it comes to that. And I also want to just touch on something that the inner size reminded me of, and I think pretty much everyone will have heard me tell that my story, which I think you can see on the website, about me going to unleash the power within, unleash the power within, and walking on burning hot coals, and then doing the Dickens process where Tony got us to think about what our limiting beliefs were. And the reason that I went through that process of imagining myself being in a 1-bedroom flat surrounded by pizza boxes, weighing 20 stone, gut hanging over the side of the chair, the reason I went through that mental process was because before that, what he'd made us do was work out what our limiting beliefs were. And at the time, my limiting belief was that I didn't need to take my health seriously, because it was okay that I was 3 stone overweight, I was drinking too much, and I wasn't but also that I was working too many hours. So my limiting belief was around my working hours and my health, in that I could get away with it. But what he made me do was he made me think, well, okay, what's the worst that can happen 5 years from now if this path continues on? And 5 years from now, I'd got some visions that were pretty bad. Then it went to 10 years, and then it went to 20 years. 20 years was where I was sat in the flat, weighing 20 stone. Carol and the girls had left. The business had folded. There's actually another part to that story which I never tell anyone, because it's far more gruesome and miserable than the bit that I do tell. But all of that was around my limiting belief. And the reason that he got us to do that was because if you don't map forward the problem of a limiting belief, you don't understand the importance of changing it. And so what I want you to do is I do want you to spend, and now because I've been going for about an hour, I'll give you maybe 10 minutes this time. If you want to go and make a cup of coffee and nip to the loo or whatever as well, you can do. It's a good opportunity to do that. But what I want you to be doing while you do that, and while you sit afterwards, and again, I'll put some thinking music on, is think, what beliefs are stopping me achieving my goal? Is it that, that's too big a goal to achieve? Is it, whatever it is, is it that not looking after my health won't really impact my future? Is it that not saving enough, not putting enough money into my pension, not putting enough money, not having an ISA, not having life insurance won't be a big problem? Whatever it is, try and identify one limiting belief. And then what I want you to do is, that I'm not going to take you through the Dickens process of have you all screaming and yelling like we were in the Doctrines arena. But what I would like you to do is think, what's the worst thing that could happen 5 years from now as a result of that limiting belief? And what's the worst thing that could happen 20 years from now as a result of that limiting belief? Again, I'm not going to get you to share any of this stuff. This is all personal, but I'd like you to identify a limiting belief that you think is stopping you achieving some of these goals. I'd like you to then work out what the worst thing is 5 years from now and the worst thing 20 years from now as a result of you not hitting, of carrying on with that limiting belief. And then finally, one last thing. Oh, no, I'll come back to that last thing afterwards. I'll leave you to do that. We'll have 10 minutes to do that, and I'll again put some music on. Okay, so with limiting beliefs, if you what you really want to do is you want to identify a kind of a flip of that limiting belief. So, for example, instead of saying living an unhealthy lifestyle is not going to impact my future, um, you might replace that with having an unhealthy lifestyle could cost me everything that is important to me. It might be something like that, but what you want to do is have that embedded somewhere in your goals so that you've got that limiting belief to continue to refer back to, and your new empowering belief, as it would be called, to continue to focus on. So let's start thinking about setting goals, because strategic coach talking about the importance of setting goals about in terms of the 4 C's. So what they mean by that is that it's all about making a commitment, and that's that scary big commitment. And what happens by making that commitment is you kind of mentally, once you've written that commitment down, it starts to give you the courage to work out, well, okay, how might I achieve that? And then that courage gives you the opportunity, or gives you the wherewithal to go and research actually how you would do that. And research could be anything. It could be experimentation, it could be reading, it could be asking other people. That gives you the capability. And then once you've got the capability, that gives you the confidence to do it. So if you think about it in terms of my Ironman, I made a commitment by writing it down. When I wrote that 3-year goal down to do an Ironman, I didn't tell anyone about the fact that I put that on my 3-year goal, because it seems so outlandish that there was no way I could get my head around how I could achieve it. But by writing that down, that gave me the courage to go off and do some shorter triathlons, get my head around what I was talking about. That was part of my research. Then it was to meet people and chat to people that were experienced at doing Ironmans. That gave me the capability. And then by having that capability, that gave me the confidence to actually sign up for it and then do the Ironman. So whatever it is with regards to your goals, is that commitment to something big and scary that will generate the courage, which will generate the capability, and will then generate the confidence to actually achieve it. Now, when you're setting your goals, there's lots of different things that you want to think about, but use 2021 to working within efficient portfolio. For goodness sake, make sure there's some financial goals in there, and use 2021 to get your finances into an even better place than they are today. So I'd expect, working within a firm like this, that some of your goals are focused on your finances, whether that's putting protection in place to make sure if something unexpected happens, you've got the right cover there. It's very well sitting there and saying to clients that you need this, but you've got to make sure that you've got it for yourself as well. The same with your savings, same with your pension contribution, same with having a will or a lasting power of attorney, all of those sorts of things. Make sure your own house is in order. And if you're not quite sure about what that is, maybe watch the Wealth Workshop for some inspiration in some different areas. But goals are really important to give our life drive and purpose. But one of the books that I mentioned earlier on that I've only just finished reading was a book called Untethered Soul. And it was interesting because it referred to death and the importance of death in giving life meaning. And so one of the story I tell at the end of of Entrepreneurial Happiness is, so this is my mate Rob, best mate from university. He was one of my ushers. I was his best man. And he was a Cornish dairy farmer. He absolutely loved his dairy herd, mad passionate about dairy farming. And he was just about to launch, when are we talking here? About 14 years ago, Innocent Smoothies was doing really well, but there wasn't a yogurt equivalent. So he was about to launch a yogurt that was similar to Innocent Smoothies. And then around his 30th birthday, he went over to Scandinavia. I can't remember whether it was Norway or Sweden, because he was going to see an anaerobic digestion plant for the farm, which he was thinking of installing it. And he went with his brother and his dad. He'd actually got his divorce had just come through from his marriage, but he'd been seeing somebody else. And he said on this trip out that when he got back, he said to his brother, because the paperwork, I think the divorce came through while he was on this trip. He said to his brother he was going to propose to his girlfriend when he got back. So he's just starting to get his life back in order after a broken marriage. Business was going well, and while his brother and his dad were on the ground watching him fly over this anaerobic digestion plant, the plane did a nosedive on coming into the approach for landing, and him and the pilot were killed instantly. And I tell you this because, none of us, he was 30, he lived an incredible life. Clearly he would have achieved so much more if he'd gone on beyond 30 years, but he achieved a huge amount in his 30 years. And none of us actually do know when our time is going to be up. So it's really important that we do live life at full speed and achieve the most that we possibly can in our time, because we will never know when our time is up. And the Untethered Soul talks about how it's death that gives life. We shouldn't fear death. It's death that gives life meaning to when we're here. And it's because without, ultimately, if there was no death, then life would go on forever and life would become, pretty much meaningless, wouldn't it? So when you're setting your goals, I want you to think about, well, okay, if this was the last 3 years I had on earth, or you clearly can't tear up the rule book and say, well, okay, if this was my last month, this is what I do, because it might not be your last month. But you do need to think about if this was your last year, what would you be doing? If this was your last 3 years, what you'd be doing when you're setting those goals, because it will give you so much more meaning. And I've taken you. Sorry, yeah, go for it.
No one's to quit their job just yet.
That's exactly my point in terms of ripping up the rule book. But the lifetime extender is an exercise I've taken you guys through that of not every year, but some years. And you don't need to draw it out necessarily in this way. But the lifetime extender is an exercise that I first went through when I started Strategic Coach. And I think it's a really powerful way of just trying to, because setting big goals that scare you is actually really difficult. Setting big enough goals that really do stretch you is actually really quite challenging. It's probably the most difficult bit. So I want to take you through this lifetime extender exercise because I'd said earlier that Dan Sullivan works on the basis he's going to live to 154, so much to the extent that I think, I don't have the book. I gave it to somebody. I think Natesha's got it. He actually wrote a book on the fact that he's going to live to 154. But the point of this living to 154 principle is not that, he's mates with Peter Diamandis, so he's probably got as good a chance of making it to 154 as anyone here, because he's going to get access to the technology that's available, albeit he's probably too old to benefit from some of it. It'll come too late for him. But the important thing is that he's actually living life as if he's going to live to 154. And when you've got that mindset of I'm going to live life to 154, you do go about setting your goals and living your life in a very different way. It's one of the reasons why we don't suggest that you quit your job now, because with death in mind, you've still also got to be living life with on the basis that you may well live to 154 or whatever the number is. So I want to take you through this lifetime stretch, or the lifetime extender, as Strategic Coach call it, to try and help give you a little bit of inspiration for setting some bigger goals. So what I want you to do is that you can maybe get a blank piece of paper, flip it into landscape, and just roughly draw out these boxes like we've got on here. And in the first, or in this box here, the first, the top right age box. This box here, this middle age box. When I say what age are you going to live to, I'd like you just to put the first number that comes into mind. So whatever you think is the first, The instinct says, when I ask you how long you live to, just put the first number that comes into mind. And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to say that for each of these different areas listed below, how do you want to be 1 week or 1 year, let's call it 1 year, 1 year before this age? So let's say you wrote 85 in here. Let's call it 1 week. 1 week before you get to age 85, your 85th birthday, how do you want to be physically? How do you want to be mentally? How do you want to be financially? How do you want your relationships to be? Self-assessment is kind of like whatever you want it to be, really. I can't remember what we meant by that. Professionally, and you don't have to do every one of these, but I would encourage you to do most of them. So I'm going to give you a few minutes just to write down how you want to be a week before you reach that birthday in each of these categories. And I'll try and find some more appropriate thinking music in the meantime. So if you get to, let's call it age 85, sorry, you can't see my mouse, can you? You get to age 85 and you're physically still able to, so when I did this originally, I still wanted to be able to scuba dive by the time I was hitting this age, mentally wanted to be still alert, to be able to, I can't remember what description I used there when I first did this. Financially, I wanted to be financially independent. I wanted to have amazing relationships with my family and my friends. Professionally, I wanted to be seen at the very top of the game. Environment, I wanted to live in an amazing house here in Rutland and in Cornwall and spend a load of time traveling. And spiritually, I wanted to be happy. But if I get to age 85 and you get to whatever age you put in here, with all of these things in place, what's the chance of you actually dying at 85? It's pretty slim, isn't it? If you could still be physically fit enough to do whatever you've put in here and mentally well enough and financially you're okay and relationships are good, the chance of you dying at that age is pretty slim. So now what I want you to do is think about, well, okay, if I get to 85 and I'm in the shape that I'm in with these particular things here, now that I know that I'm going to live to, what age am I now going to live to? If I get to age 85 and I'm in this shape here, I want you to put the new age you're going to live to in this top right age box here. So let's say it's 100 as an example. As I say, for me, it's 112. Now, what if you knew with certainty that you were going to live to that new age, 112, 154, whatever it is, what would you want to do with your life? Now, this isn't what would you do in those extra 15 years or 20 years that you've just gained. And by the way, you can thank me later for just giving you an extra 20 years to your life. But this isn't what would you do in those 20 years. This is what would you do between now and this age 112 or whatever it is, based on the knowledge that you're going to live to 112. And what I want you to do is just write down some ideas. It could be things that are really straightforward, things like learning a new language, or I want to play an instrument, or I'd want to do but it's basically you've just gained a whole load of time. What goals can you set yourself? What would you like to be achieving now that you know that you've got a longer life? So again, I'll give you some music and I'll give you a few minutes to think about what that is. And by the way, it doesn't need to be one for each of these: physical, mental, financial. It's just stuff. What things do you want to be achieving and doing over your lifetime, now that you know that you've got a whole load of extra time to do it? Okay, so last stage then. So what I want you to do now is go back to this box here, and instead of doing this for the next 3 years, as this is sometimes we would do here, What I want you to do is to write, if you want to achieve these things over the course of your life, what have you got to do this year to get you on track to being able to achieve that? So what have you got to do? So let's think about it in a slightly different way. If we were sat here 1 year from now, looking back, what needs to have happened for you to have made a start to achieving those goals there? Again, I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. But what we're trying to do, and you can actually redo this exercise again with this mindset of having these extra few years, but when you come to think about your 3-year goals as well, I decided to mix it up a bit and think about 1-year goals. But it's really good to, when you're setting goals, to have this mindset of, I'm going to live to 154, I'm going to live to 112, or whatever it is, because it just opens up your mind as to what you can achieve and what you can take on.